Stan, I went ahead and started the recording just so I don't forget.
Sure, that's fine. How long does it take you to produce the YouTube video after you're done?
I get the recording link like within 10 minutes, and then I can have it to you today within a couple hours for sure. I'm just saying a couple hours, that gives me plenty of time.
And what about the chat? Do they automatically give you a chat transcript?
Yeah, it automatically does that also.
Okay, great.
So,
I was on a call last week where we used a Zoom knockoff called VOOV. That was because I was broadcasting in China. And that was interesting because I would pause. I have to pause every couple sentences for them to translate to Chinese.
Yeah, it's challenging. Yeah. I'll feel a little better when Arielle joins, since she's my co-presenter.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
All I have to do is mention her name, and there she is.
just taking a couple quick bites of breakfast.
It's lunchtime. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, you find time when you can find time.
Mm-hmm.
So you want me to go ahead and kick this off, Dan?
Yeah, whatever you think is best.
Okay, I'll just do a quick intro and you can take it away. I'd like to welcome everyone to this month's SIKM Leaders Community Call. This is the 205th call that we've done since we started back in 2005. Every month, we feature a different speaker or discussion leader, or in this case, a combination of presentation and demonstration. And we're doing things a little differently today, using Zoom rather than our normal conferencecall.com. And we're pleased to have with us Dan Ranta and Arielle Band. And Dan, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Stan. I appreciate this opportunity. I presented a couple of times, and it's always an honor to participate with SIKM. I think the kind of from an intellectual standpoint, the highest caliber knowledge management group going in the world today. Show me one that's better, and you'll prove me wrong. Today's topic is strategic alignment and how that helps to drive purposeful collaboration. It's interesting. I have a client right now. They call it discipline collaboration, which I kind of like discipline collaboration also, but I'm going to stick with purposeful collaboration today. And I'd like to also talk about that I'm very thankful that Arielle Band is joining us today. And Arielle, a quick introduction for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very excited to be here as well. Daniel speaks very highly of this group. A little nervous to be talking about this and presenting my first time, but I'm excited to be here. My name is Arielle Band. I work for an organization called Envision, and we have a collaboration software. And I just found Daniel, and we've had some really fantastic conversations, and he actually conducted one of these strategic alignment sessions for our organization, which was exceptionally helpful and valuable, and using our software. So excited to talk to you guys a little bit about that today.
Well, thank you, Arielle. And let me go ahead and get started. Today, I'm going to do a little bit of an advertisement on the graduate program, but I'm going to mix in why strategic alignment and that purposeful collaboration idea is so important. And I'll talk about some of the key reasons why, those key benefits behind it, and then go into some different techniques to do the gap analysis and why it's important in building on that idea. The strategic visioning, and really that's the key topic, and that's where we're going to do a demo, and Arielle's going to kind of take over and show the experience that we had in leveraging the Envision software known as Freehand to be able to do this kind of session online. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get started. So for the last, I think nearly 2 years, I've been and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I've been a member of the advisory board, and there's a number of people that are active in SIKM, of course, including Stan there, and you can see at the bottom in terms of the KM advisory board for the graduate school. The Knowledge Management Graduate School at Kent State University, it fits underneath what they call their I school, and where the other 5 programs you see across, I have the knowledge management one highlighted. There's kind of 2 flavors to the program. One is a full master's degree, which requires 30 hours. And one is a 12-hour credit program. You know, I think it's worth mentioning that we have a number of students in the program that that have their organizations either partially or fully funding this. And so under the leadership of Dr. Kendra Albright, she's done a really good job of corralling a great advisory board to be able to create just a better and better program, and to discover where the gaps in the program are, et cetera, and opportunities to improve. So I want to thank anybody that's on the advisory board for sure, that's on the call with us today. You know, it's interesting. I teach actually 2 courses. The course that I initially designed was called Designing and Building Knowledge Management in the Workplace. And then Stan was going to be teaching actually the Community of Practice course, but he was unable to do so. And so I stepped in and taught that for the first time over a 5-week condensed period in the summer of this year. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And the materials that I've created for the course fall in these strategic focus areas or swim lanes. And what's interesting is I was looking at the materials, and of course I understand the materials very well since I created them, and just thinking which ones relate to driving strategic alignment for any kind of collaboration program, knowledge management project, et cetera. And of course, my initial column there, my main initial column is module number 2, business value and measurement, and how to drive that alignment. And of course, all of those definitely relate, but there's several other ones. I have them highlighted here in kind of a maroon or rust colored font in bold. And so for me, it's a really big part. And it's one of the things in terms of teaching at Kent State, this was my first time, and Arielle mentioned she was nervous, but I was nervous when I first started teaching, because you kind of wonder what the students' reaction is going to be. And I can genuinely tell you that the students have really enjoyed that element of it. It makes it helps make the program, what I'm talking about, it makes it a lot more real, so to speak, in that, you know, knowledge management, it's always been difficult to measure. I'm not saying that I figured this out and that I'm perfect at talking about it and teaching about it, but I try to give a lot of different ideas and real stories about how you can achieve that measurement and the purposeful collaboration with strategic business alignment. So it's kind of interesting. So I try to bring that to bear. Purposeful collaboration, a little graphic on the right here, but there's a lot of reasons why this is important. You know, it gives you a far better chance in your program to be successful, for sure. And it definitely, you're always going to be looking for measurement options. And when you get the people involved in doing some type of gap analysis, like strategic visioning, for example, which we'll specifically focus on today, you get that the buy-in is so important. People talk about, you know, the change management element, how behavioral aspects are so important to knowledge management. And this helps bring it into play, because when you do a session, when you get people stacking hands, it just affords you the opportunity to have key stakeholders that are really buying in on what it is you're trying to achieve. And particularly when it has a purposeful bent to it in terms of business value. So, and there's 2 things that I like to talk about that I've learned over the years is that, you know, employees, what they want is they want to understand how their own personal business objectives relate to what it is that they're working to achieve on a daily basis. And also they want to be able to see, in terms of, say, a strategic implementation plan, maybe their involvement within a community, for example, and how that's making a difference, so they can kind of really understand. And what managers want to see is that you get a scenario whereby there's very little space, and I like to put my hands together when I do that, between why it is we're collaborating and what we're trying to achieve for an organization or a publicly traded company, et cetera. And I think that with the techniques we're going to talk about today, you'll have a much greater chance. And it opens a door to be able to do other things, to create what I like to call a more agile organization. We did that when I was the executive in charge of knowledge management at GE. We built a lot of adjunct functionality, like even a mentor-mentee connection based on the taxonomical topics that we put into over 200 communities out there. So other doors opened up when we were really, really focused on driving business value and where it hurts the most. And maybe you can think of, I'll just pause here for a second, if there's any other reasons that that I may be forgetting that are glaring examples of why strategic alignment for any KN project is important. I've covered them all so thoroughly, nobody else has any other ideas. Of course, I'm just kidding. Let me go ahead. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that it's kind of like an instinct. When you first start working with a company or you first start working with a group, what is it? And I'm using these kind of examples that are at the far end of the left and the right continuum when it comes to this whole idea of managing and controlling your destiny just a little bit better. When you go in and you work with a group and maybe you've had this experience, it just sometimes feels like, it's really cute to watch, 3, 4, 5-year-old girls and boys playing soccer, and they kind of, how they chase the ball all over the field. They move in a group, and the parents are on, I was there at one point on the sidelines cheering, as everyone chases the ball, etc. But within an organization, you have to, I think, have instincts around, is this what's happening? This kind of reactive or more random approach, which is really undesirable. And, what could be achieved in terms of, organizing and being more strategic, and it's definitely more desirable. And on the right, I've always said, wouldn't it be better if we were orchestrating beautiful music? So that's the concept in broad brushstrokes. And it's important, and I would say imperative, to pick up on this when you're working. And I've worked with different groups. I've heard groups talking, or I've seen posts made where, let's just go out and create a community. Well, why are you going to create a community? Why are you going to do this initiative or that initiative? And so that's kind of the idea that I'm bringing forward today. In classic terms, in terms of doing discovery and doing gap analysis, there's 3 main ways you can do this that I don't know if the world has really changed over the years. Interviews is a way that I tend to do a lot of discovery with interviews, and I like it because it's very qualitative in nature. You can have individual interviews, or I can group people and do interviews. And of course, we can do this in the world we're in more and more today, still in a virtual sense. And that can work. On the quantitative side, you can get more people involved if you do a survey. There are challenges that come with that. You can definitely get, like I said, the quantity can be higher. My favorite type of discovery to do gap analysis has always been workshops. But during the pandemic, obviously, doing face-to-face workshops was out of the question, really out of the question. And that's when Arielle mentioned that I'll call it serendipity. We met each other, and I think she contacted me via LinkedIn. Sometimes we all get kind of crazy messages via LinkedIn, but I always read every message that I get and say, there may be something there, you never know. And sure enough, I contacted her, and I was very, very impressed with what she was doing with InVision and freehand software. But one of the things that I had been looking for was a methodology, a template, a use case within this type of software to be able to do and conduct a strategic visioning session virtually. And that's what she helped me build. And I was really, really impressed with what the software was able to do. So looking back several years, when I first got to GE as the executive in charge, I had a lot of challenges. And when I first got there, my first week, I'll never forget, I was walking down my first day on the job. I was walking down the hallway. To me, this is a little bit funny. And I was just looking for the coffee pot, right? And this guy comes up to me and says, "Are you the guy that's in charge of knowledge management?" And I said, yeah, I'm going to be, I'm that person, and I'm just looking for coffee at this point. And he said, "Can you get Google for us? All we need here is Google." And I was like, holy smokes, I got nobody working for me. I got no resources or anything. All I'm thinking of, your mind can only think of one thing at one time, and it was just coffee. And I remember I said something like, yeah, we'll be working on that. Or, I wanted to say something positive, yet not mislead. And so one of the first things that I did at this time, GE, it's really, they've been in the throes of a huge transformation, and now they're breaking up as a company. When I first got there, the challenges were so significant. One of the first things I did within 2 months of getting there was I invited 95 people to do a face-to-face strategic visioning session. And these are photos from that actual session. This happened in January of 2016. I got there in 2015 because I knew that we needed to get people stacking hands. This is from an overall knowledge management program perspective, of course, but it even though maybe half the 60 people that attended came there just to kick the tires on whether or not this guy Ranta knew what the hell he was talking about, I could care less why they came. I just wanted to get him in the room because after the 9-hour session, we came up with our first, the challenge was massive. I mean, the one thing I would focus on is that I found 75 plus people that had some kind of knowledge management role within the company. And so we wanted to drive toward something that was better governed and more purposeful, and to really get strategic alignment and a consistency in how we roll this out across the 9 businesses with 65,000 engineers at really the core of my overall strategic roadmap, or stakeholder map rather. We wanted to put together our future. And I was overt. Now I created this first strategic roadmap for what we were going to go after. You can see that I'm 6 feet tall, and I think it was 8 feet tall when I printed it out on a plotter printer there and put it on my wall. And people would come up and they'd look at it, and I said, "Oh, what's that?" Well, that's what our plan is. And after 5 years there, we were on version 30 of this, just because we just kept evolving it as we went forward. Okay, so that was from an overall perspective. And I have one more example that I want to talk about here before I turn this over to Arielle. And I want to talk about a company that I was working for as a global auto manufacturing company. And in this case, this is for using strategic visioning and driving alignment for an individual community. So I want to give this as a nice example. So the community was for what's known as additive manufacturing, or sometimes it's called rapid prototyping in different environments, but it's essentially how you leverage 3D printing to be able to do stuff a lot faster and a lot more effectively across organizations. So in the case of this large auto manufacturing company, they have 11 plants. This was back in 2015 when I did this session, early 2015, or maybe late 2014, I did a session for them. This community was made up of individuals across their 11 plants, 2 in Mexico, 7 in North America, or I should say the US, and 2 in Canada. So 11 plants in North America. They were, it's kind of interesting. The founder of this company had a lot of famous sayings. And one of those famous sayings was carry your own torch, which kind of aligns with a siloed behavior, go forward and just, kind of with blinders on. And this group was interesting. When we first got them together, these were 30 people in a core team with 2 or 3 people from each of the plants that I cited, the plant locations. And this session was only 4 hours. And this was set up to get them to start to stack hands on how they could create a community and stop working in silos. They all had the best of intentions. I'll never forget when the group first got together, most of them met each other face to face. And so they came together at their headquarters location. They all flew in. So this was an expensive meeting, 30 people, most of them flying in from different locations, et cetera. So you can imagine face-to-face meetings can be a little bit on the expensive side. And so this was them going through the different exercises and the process to be able to determine and I want to cut to the chase here. What I like to do with a strategic visioning session and to drive strategic alignment is work with leadership beforehand and come up with what I call strategic focus areas, or in more common, kind of almost like slang vernacular, I call them swim lanes. So they came up with these 7 swim lanes. And one of the interesting things is that when you look at the headlines, the topics of the swim lane, you can start to imagine that if you get alignment on these kind of things, leadership and communication, you start to get the leadership and sponsorship of the community. You start to understand the behavioral aspects. You start to understand, for them, the additive manufacturing or rapid prototyping excellence, and how they were looking to make a difference in terms of business, and that combined with the results and the metrics. It's a company that really measures things. So that was very, very important for them. They wanted to create a more active learning organization kind of on that trajectory. And then they agreed to make knowledge sharing, or how they were working to establish their community, one of their actual swim lanes. So you can imagine, in looking at those swim lane titles, how you can start to get people to have alignment, to stack hands. And if you didn't have the luxury of having people do this session and coming together, interesting thing is, what I've learned over the years is, when people come together and they stack hands, there's way less likelihood that they're going to back out at some other point and say, you know what, I don't really agree with that. They were there and they agreed on what it is that they came up with. Within one day of the session, we were able to come up with their first strategic framework, where they start to see what we're going to achieve across, tucked underneath the swim lanes. That's actually when they fleshed out the gaps that they identified from the current state activities and what they could achieve in the future state, and then did the gap analysis exercise, where they determined that the action-oriented items tucked underneath those strategic focus areas, this is what their first version looked like. And I also asked them also to score. While things are fresh in people's minds, I do a simple 2x2, and I like them to put the items based on what swim lane they're in into this. And I always focus my attention on that upper left-hand quadrant. What's better than something that's relatively easy to do? The complexity is on the x-axis on the bottom. So those are easy to do, and it has high value. So those items could be items that you determine to be our priority items. A strategy is about determining what your options are, and then identifying what the priorities are. So from a broad brush standpoint, it's nice to get an early gut feel. And that's what I did with this community, to give them, like I said earlier, the greatest chance to be successful. And it's not hard. This methodology, by the way, if anyone's interested in it, I can share it with you, how you do one of these sessions. Just contact me and I'll share the methodology with you. It's, like I said earlier, it's one of the components of what I teach at Kent State. So when I mentioned before, when I met Arielle, I had been struggling a little bit, because these sessions were so effective, yet you get shut down. You can't do things face to face. And I was just always wondering, could I do this virtually? And I just kind of knew, and it was going to be so hard to be able to put it together. And I couldn't really envision for myself. My mind could only go so far to figure out how we could make this happen. And then Arielle contacted me, and one thing led to another, and we came up with a really nice use case. So Arielle, anything incorrect about how I told that story?
Not at all. Not at all. It was a very fortuitous meeting, and I think on our end as well. And I did a brief intro, but just a little bit of information on Envision. So Envision is a software company. We move very quickly. We iterate very quickly. So I think, as you could probably understand, it's very easy for us to get into that, 5-year-olds playing soccer cluster ball. And especially as the pandemic hit. So we're a fully remote, very international company. Prior to the pandemic, we had what we called IRLs, which is our in real life meetings, where they brought broad swaths of the organization together so we could have alignment like this in terms of where we were moving forward and how we were going to kind of direct that symphony in lockstep in terms of the iterations of the organization. And when the pandemic hit, obviously travel significantly was reduced. And, we were kind of 2 years into this, a little bit of, candidly, kind of cluster soccer, trying to figure out how to get a remote organization on multiple different time zones that is very quick moving and very iterative to move forward. And In some of the research, I just kind of came across Daniel, and like he said, just randomly crazy LinkedIn messages. And we started talking about this process and wound up building a very robust template. And to Daniel's point, we have this as a template actually in freehand. But we built this very robust freehand, and this is the entire thing. I'm giving you kind of the zoomed out view of it, that really helped us as an organization become more aligned in the initiatives. And so what Daniel and I wound up doing was working with the international team. We brought in folks from we had product, we had marketing, we had sales folks, we had our customer service folks across all different levels. So everyone from kind of a very low business development level all the way up to the head of our international team. And across, I think we were representative of maybe like 7 countries at that point. And I think probably 2 or 3 continents, because we had some folks joining in from Australia. And we're really able to align and come together on a direction. And then to Daniel's point, really continue to work that and be a very, very agile organization through the process. So as we continue to iterate and change and grow and develop on what we're trying to accomplish as a business, this is a very agile and living document that we continue to leverage and build on. And it's very easy for us to quickly get back together and have some of these dialogues, given the foundation that we were able to build with Daniel. So I'm going to jump into kind of the slide version of this here. Just to be clear, this is freehand that we're working in today, and we have everything in here from the slides that I'll walk you through to the working element. So, you know, from Daniel's pictures, you saw all the Post-its and the stickies. We have very similar process that we kind of work through and leveraged here as well, that I'll show you guys kind of how that worked.
And you know what, Arielle, I was really impressed with how, because I was kind of thinking, you know, old school, like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna show the slides, you know, we go through the session. You were like, well, we can just make the slides right here, you know. So I was like, well, how can we do that, you know? So that was a good experience for me, and it turned out to be, you know, obviously way better. So everything was included.
Yeah, it all lives in here, which is fantastic. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of, actually, let me just start here, of how we kind of walked through this with the team. We essentially had a 2-day session. So meeting through Zoom, just like this, very interactive. And if you guys have questions or anything like that, please just feel free to raise a hand, ask any of the above, pop it in the chat.
And you know, that was, just to add, that was brand new for me, because once you get people together, I had only done these face-to-face, over 170 of these types of sessions with different organizations. You have to, you know, it's Carpe Diem time. You got to have everybody, you got to finish it, because you're never going to get this chance again to get everybody together. So the fact that we were able to go through about half the session in one day, and then wait another a week later, you know, finish the session, that was a super cool option.
Yeah, and it was great too, I think, because it allowed, especially on our side, it really allowed folks to process the information, right? So you didn't have to fly them in and force them through a session in 1 or 2 days, where it was just very kind of rapid fire. This was rapid fire, a good amount of work, a good amount of collaboration, and then could kind of process and live with it for the week, and add some thoughts, add some additional stickies and Post-its in there, and then really come back and move forward. And really how we went through this session is all Daniel. This is all his amazing brain. But really setting the stage for what the visioning session was, and then working through 3 core exercises. So we went through what's called Castaway Island, and I'll walk through these, the future state visioning, and then really how are we going to build initiatives to close these gaps. And then we had a report out of the whole process. We did exercise 1 and 2 on day 1, and then we did exercise 3, and we're able to do some of the report out kind of real time on day 2 as well. So again, we walked through this process, and I think a lot of what strategic visioning was and is for us was really helping get multiple people at multiple levels from multiple perspectives to go in and really understand what are some of the big issues and challenges that we're facing, and how can we close the gaps on those across certain timeframes. And I think to the 2x2 that Daniel showed as well, what is the work effort, and where does it make sense for us to really focus our time in kind of a short, medium, and long-term perspective. So this session was really valuable for us to get a lot of clarity from a lot of different perspectives in a very, very short amount of time. And I think to Daniel's point, right, you really need to kind of think through what's the type of change you're working on? Where are you focusing, right? Are you kind of sitting in the today and the churn, which in a lot of ways was where we work. So we kind of couldn't get out of our own way because we couldn't sit down and have these strategic conversations, versus really being defined and thoughtful and forward thinking in where you wanted to go, and then really iterating on that. And really, we worked through a lot on trusting the process. So it feels a little messy at the beginning, like it's a little kind of all over the place, honestly, with the Castaway Island. And as we're trying to kind of pull some of this stuff too with the future state visioning, and it was great because as folks were working through it, kind of similar to being able to walk around the room, Daniel and I were able to pop in rooms and answer questions and kind of help folks real time, just in the same way that you would with a room, and really kind of direct them and continue moving them forward in the process to a really great point where there was this synergy and this understanding across the board. Sorry, Daniel, were you going to say something?
No, that was one of the things I was worried about, though, in terms of being able to move around. Because normally I like to do it one of these sessions face to face in a huge room, and you kind of put different groupings in the corner when you get to, and then they can kind of they have their thing going on, and you're able to keep them kind of cordoned off in a sense based on space. And but we didn't miss a beat. We were able to do it just as you said, Arielle.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Okay, so as we work through this, we started out with Castaway Island, and really what Castaway Island is kind of the first stage of that sticky notes, right? Of really understanding, yeah, if you're moving off to a desert island and you can only bring a certain amount of things, right? What are the things that you would absolutely bring to the island, and what are things that you would leave behind? Right. So this is when folks are usually sitting at their at the table, jotting on their Post-it notes, right, and just flipping them. And essentially what we were able to do is, instead of having kind of the physical Post-it notes, and I did promise Daniel we are working on a gold color because he loves his gold. But instead of having the Post-it notes, essentially we had kind of virtual Post-it notes for folks. So there's no limit on the number that they can do. Each person had their own space, and you can see that everybody has their names very clearly indicated. They're going into their space. You can get a very quick view as a facilitator of kind of where folks are, right? Are they doing good processes? Are we really capturing, like, obviously, Bruce struggled a little bit. He only has one here, so we can kind of see and prompt a little bit and have that big picture view. But essentially, this was really quiet brainwriting. We set a timer. There's a timer within the app that you can use. and we set a timer and just had everybody take, 10 minutes and write down, here are all the things that we want to keep, and here are all the things that we want to leave. Very easy to do that. And then we're able to do, again, present outs with the team where we could zoom in on each one and they can pick one thing that they would want to keep or one thing that they would want to leave to really start to facilitate some of that conversation. Okay. Once we did that, we were able to, prior to that work, we had created with the head of the international team, some draft swim lanes. So some of the areas that he thought really needed that strategic focus. And then as we're working through what we're going to keep and what we're going to take with us or what we're going to leave behind, we're really starting to see some of these themes come through, right? And really be able to start to group some of these categories, some of these keep and leave behind under some of the key focus areas that were originally defined. It also is really helpful to see if there was anything that was kind of an outlier that didn't necessarily fit into these that might have needed to draw another strategic focus area. So that was really valuable. And then we moved into exercise 2, where we were taking them from the current state and really moving them into the future state and really getting into, okay, so if we're ultimately successful with this whole process, we were looking at a 365-day time frame. How would everything look different, right? So this is kind of the blue sky thinking. What does it feel like? Like, how do we know that we've hit world class? What are some of the characteristics of how we operate? So really kind of putting people on that blue sky thinking, where's the ideal that we want to get to? And very similarly, had them go through on the gold sticky notes and do another quiet brain thinking for them to be able to jot down all of those ideas. And then where we went from there was starting to then continue to work through it. And so we took those 3 swim lanes that the leader had set out, that we had kind of looked at the different themes as they were presenting out and really saw those and had them broken out. So you can see here, we've got the team and culture, we've got the customer value and the operational excellence. We've got them all broken down by colors. And we had teams aligned to the different groups here. So you can see, you can have a little fun with it, right? We had the folks do little introductions, show their pictures, and really laid out for the different areas that we were asking them to focus on. And then what they were able to do was grab all of the Post-it notes that had been written in the silent brain writing, and are able to, so these you can just really copy and paste and drag and drop, and bring them over to start to create different kind of themes and categories, right? So you can see we've got a theme around hiring, we've got a theme around values, balance, diversity, inclusivity, and this is really kind of that like deeper work time, right? Where the teams are collaborating. I think, Daniel, you talked about it as like the stacking hands alignment, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're really having the conversation and digging into, what are the things that we've seen? What are the things that we want to keep? What are the things that we want to leave behind? And kind of how can we group those into different themes? And so, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. That was 3. So actually, as I recall, Daniel, what you and I had done after day 2 was we actually were able to take the work that had been done, right, and start to group it behind the scenes. So instead of having to like take all the boards down and all the Post-it notes and start to type all this and write it all up, I think you and I had spent an hour, as I recall, and just started grouping those into the different themes to start to build that work for them for the next time for initiative 3.
Yeah, we did, because, sometimes I call the current state, good and bad, leave behind items, and then the future state items. I call that your fodder. So you want to, the reason what you were just showing was good, because the reason that all of those, the pink, green, and gold items come together is that's your input. That's your input to start to see individually, tucked underneath the strategic focus areas, like you showed, those groupings, what it is you're looking to achieve to get somewhere. And you started to see in that last slide you showed how you're really forming more, sometimes I call it an ecosystem. And it's hard. I said the mind can only think of one thing before, or maybe two things if you're lucky at one time. And you've got a lot of kind of components out there. And that's the same thing when you're creating a community or any knowledge management initiatives. There's a lot of pieces to it. You're going to do some things first, some things, there's a natural order sometimes to things, but there's a lot to think about. So getting people to stack hands. And one of the things too that I remember in the session was that particularly with future state visioning, it's a beautiful thing when it comes to just doing that exercise. You'll always have people that are positive, but then you've got the negative people. I'm always interested in the negative people, the naysayers, the glass is half empty. And you bring them along because the whole thing kind of gets equalized when other people start seeing other people say, different positive things. And, do I want to be the one that comes forward with something that's maybe a little bit on the negative side? No, we're thinking about what we want to achieve in 365 days or in the next year, where we want to get to, up that mountainside that we can see, that's our vision, our destiny. So that happened in your session where you started to get everybody kind of, just seeing more and more positively what it is that you could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point, we had a question from Adrian on if Envision has the ability to collaborate anonymously. We do. So you can be an anonymous collaborator. What we have found is that in this environment, people are more willing to speak up about things because it's not as stressful as having to stand up and talk in front of a group or stand up and present something in front of the room, right? It's as little as being able to put an idea on a Post-it note. And so while you can have the ability to collaborate anonymously, we find that people actually get very comfortable sharing and being open about things very, very quickly without having to leverage that anonymous functionality.
The blame game question too, and the way that I would answer that is you lean into emotional intelligence, the fact that people will see how others are participating and they'll, they'll not go to that to that level. But, it's something that can happen and you got to be ready for it. There's no way that you can really, take that out of the equation. It's kind of one of the risks you take when you're going through and you're asking people to really say, those things that you want to leave behind in that island exercise, where it's a cathartic opportunity. And so you also lean into that because, when something's cathartic, it's like, this is if you don't like something, go ahead and put it out there and let's hear what it is. And let's put that on the list of things that, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we'll leave that thing behind. There's, as a facilitator, you kind of have to be ready for it, but it can be challenging for sure, but I think there's ways to manage it.
Yeah. And I will say we definitely had some folks complaining, right? So I think there was kind of that blame game, pointing fingers a little bit at the beginning, but as we worked through the process and really started focusing on the solutions that as a group the whole team would be accountable for, it really very quickly moved away from that. So I'd really second what Daniel just said about the facilitation and the process, that it gets away from that very quickly.
Yeah, we have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Nines, go ahead. Did you raise your hand?
Hi, thank you for the interesting topic. How would you address tech dinosaurs? Because in my former organization, as soon as they come across, if we're encouraged to use a new application, they go, oh my goodness, I can't even can't even do Zoom yet, or I can't master Zoom or Teams
Right.
or whatever. And especially when there are older people in the workforce, they just don't want to learn new toys anymore. And so obviously here, a lot of ideas are generated, but if they're just turned off by tech, you don't get their engagement. And so how do you handle that? And also
Let
in
me,
terms of
yeah.
buy-in, yeah, in terms of buy-in, how do you even get people to come together to spend time to do visioning? Because visioning requires a lot of reflection, right? So,
Mhm.
and things that they don't normally talk about in the office. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
And so do they get forced by senior management? Do they get, I mean, does the DJ have to say, all of you have to do this, or the director has to say, you guys have to really take the time? But, anyway, that's my question. Thanks.
Ariel has a lot of response to this, but let me just say what I'm going to say, because I was the first thing about I was the tech dinosaur on this. So I knew that I needed to be focused on the process. And what was brilliant about having Ariel, who was, she really knew the entire thing, was that there were a couple aspects that I didn't have to worry about, things moving around. And then when people and we were also very efficient. So each of our sessions was only 90 minutes. And so that it wasn't like we were asking people to be online, for a ridiculous period of time. 90 minutes is, kind of, maybe you're getting to that edge where people kind of balk a little bit, but we needed to have some time. So we did it like that. And then with her facilitation of everything, and if somebody needed to be taken by the hand or was doing something wrong, she would just, go over there and kind of do things to help them move around. Really, it came down to the participants. They had to type in Post-it notes. I mean, anybody can type, and she made it so easy for people to be able to do that. And then as the lead facilitator in the session, I didn't have to worry about moving anything around because, she was there. So it was definitely a good approach. Ariel, I'll throw that to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I think from a tech dinosaur perspective from the users, I mean, it really is as simple as coming in and it's the way this is built. It's very similar to how you work in like Word or what's it called? Whatever the Google version of that is, or PowerPoint, right? And so if I want to add to a Post-it note, right, you click into it just like you would click, and you just type, right? So it's and if I want to go on this one, I click there. And it's very easy to do that, right? And so I think from in terms of what we're asking the users to do initially, right? It's really just about putting their stuff in the Post-it notes, and the facilitator. And if anybody's interested, I'm happy to work to help do some of this and kind of walk through how it would work. The facilitator can really help with moving things around. Having said that, the moving around is very simple too. You can just click on it. Again, very similar to like a Word. You can do a Control-C, Control-V, copy and paste. You grab it, it moves. Like it's pretty, for what we're asking folks to do, it can be very, very simple. I agree with Daniel. The facilitator needs a little bit of a higher skill level. But again, happy to help or support if anybody's interested in this, because it's just something I'm personally passionate about and I think is a really valuable functionality. There are no tech dinosaurs. I don't know what you're talking about. So I know we only have about 10 minutes left. Let me just kind of run through a couple of things very quickly. Oh, that is not where I wanted to be. Went to the wrong slide. Okay, so again, as we were going through the process, we went through this gap closure process. So this was kind of on day 2. So we really worked to group everything and get everything together, and then really worked on to Daniel's point earlier. Whoa, did I just stop sharing? Sorry, did I just stop sharing somehow?
Yes, you did.
Okay,
Mhm.
let's go back. Let's go back. Apparently I'm a tech dinosaur.
You're
Um,
good.
so essentially we went through and again, we took all of the information that we had gathered and that we had grouped and everything here. And we started building out initiatives, right? And initiatives, again, to the tech question, it is very easy to take these Post-its. You can click on a Post-it, you can turn it into a card, and it all of a sudden becomes a card, and you can move it over into your initiative side of things right there. But so we started having folks like with the grouping start to create these different initiatives. So very short, 5 to 7 words, action oriented, and really driving to the solution. And then from that process, again, very easily just kind of dragging things over. We had folks really start thinking about, okay, so what does the timing on all of these initiatives look like? So are we looking at, is this a quick hit? Is this under 60 days? Is this a kind of short-term, medium-term, long-term? You can see we're not a very long-term focused organization sometimes. We were pretty much within the year timeframe. But again, taking those initiatives, putting them on a time scale, and then moving them into a that 2x2 that Daniel had talked about around, like, how hard or easy are these to do, and then let's look at the business value of them. And so you can then really start to focus very clearly. As you can see here, we've got the numbers. All of the initiatives are numbered, so it's very easily tied to some of those different things.
Yeah. I call that, by the way, I call that the helium effect. In your 2x2, nobody comes up with, on the y-axis, nobody comes up with anything that has low business value, and that's okay. That's what happens in a session. Everything kind of floats up, and it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah, we were very high on that. Very true. And then what you're able to do is, again, as a facilitator, is copy these and consolidate everything into this one chart. So you're able to look at kind of by the different themes that we originally were working through, the original swim lanes. What are the initiatives, and then how can we focus really across the board, kind of in this top left-hand corner, to have the greatest impact. That then actually turns into what we built out here, which is the action plan that Daniel had hanging up on his board that was 8 feet tall, that we have just as an embedded spreadsheet that the team can work on and be tracked on. And then again, to that kind of agile organization, we can constantly come back, see really what were the drivers, right? What were the things that people were looking at? How did we group those? How did we drive those initiatives? And then how did we look at some of this? And as things are changing, right, within the business, within the market, the economy, as things are constantly changing, we can continue to build and iterate on that process. And so kind of zooming back out, this was really at end to end, all in one place, that we've then really been able to focus, align our teams along, work toward common goals, and candidly really create successes and progress in a way that we haven't been able to since we've had our IRL in-person meetings. So just really a phenomenal process for us end to end.
I'm hopeful that people get an idea of, I like to say, go from strategy to action. And I'll go back to what I said, where all employees that are involved can see where there's really zero space between what I'm doing today and how I'm contributing. I can find myself on a strategic implementation plan like that and see how my work is contributing to what we're trying to achieve as a group or as an organization. And one of the other themes that I have that I didn't really mention, I did so maybe indirectly, is that if you're part of a knowledge management team, or you're working to transfer knowledge to a knowledge management team, say within an organization or business, that I think that having strategic services is one of the things that you want to put into play. You want to build that capability within your organization so that you can provide those kind of services to these groups that you see playing soccer like youngsters do. So it's something that can take your game kind of to the next level in terms of the services and the collaboration services that you provide within an organization or company.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do we have any other? Yeah, go ahead.
To Adrian's question. So it does, I think, make sense to have a Zoom link or some platform. Envision is actually integrated with Zoom. We also have direct integration with Microsoft Teams. And so either of those, very easy. It is also just a URL that you're using. So just kind of a web page. So any platform that has sharing, you can do that with. Having said that, it is a multiplayer, if that makes sense, technology. So if I'm in here and there's multiple folks in here, and Daniel, I don't know if you have your instance open. This is actually in your instance.
No, I don't.
But there's you can see multiple people within this at any time. So I can see, like, if Daniel was in here, I could see a little pencil moving around. That was Daniel. And so you in theory could do it with just like a conference call and having everybody within freehand. I think it's just easier if you have the ability to do screen sharing for part of it.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments on what we've been going over today? Was it helpful?
And I did, and I will drop this in the chat here in 30 seconds. But we did create a like a little playground. If you guys want to go in and see this, this is pretty close to the template that we have. Actually, this is not the right one. I have to find the right one. Sorry. Everything was going so well. Oh, this actually is the right one. Sorry. So we created the template. And so this is a kind of a blank version of everything that we just walked through. If you want to get in and just play around with it a little bit, I will share the link to this in the chat. And so you guys are welcome to come and hop in. It will essentially, just to kind of be clear and show how this would work. I think, give me 1 sec. Let me just do a quick stop share. Sorry, I know we're toward the end of this here. When you click on the link, you'll just drop it in, your little advertisement, and then you'll be able to go and see the entire process. It won't have any of the tools that I showed that you were seeing on my screen down below. In order to get those, all you need to do is click this join to collaborate up here. You can type your name in and then your email address, hit continue, and then you'll have full accessibility. It'll give you a couple days to play around in the platform with no problems. Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't mention about that G session, when I ran the numbers on that was a $200,000 meeting. And one of the cool things about this process with this software is that it's really unlimited in terms of the amount of people that can participate. Does it get a little more complicated? Absolutely. But not only do you have inability still these days to get people together physically, but from a cost perspective, I was lucky to be able to get that meeting to take place. I invited 95 people to get 60 to come. So a lot of people couldn't make it, but it was still expensive. It was a really expensive meeting. Flying for one day.
Yeah.
There's a question about how long will this be available?
Sorry, Retha, what is this? Like being able to view it and play around with it, or?
Hello, yes, just how long can we look at it? Because I'm a bit tied up in terms of other work for the next 24 hours. So I'll probably only
Oh.
be able to get to look at it, you know,
Yeah.
in a day or so. And that's why I
Oh.
was asking.
Absolutely. So that link will be available for you guys to look at as long as forever, like as long as you want. Once you click to collaborate, that will give you, I think it's still 48 hours. We're expanding it to a week, but I don't know when the time frame is. But that'll give you essentially a couple days once you log in to collaborate to go in and like test everything out. And then but once that 48 hours or week ends, you'll be able to go back and look at it again, unlimited.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see somebody in there already, which is great. 2 people in there already. Oh, I
Well,
can
thanks again.
very
Yeah, go ahead.
quickly, sorry, 3 seconds, just since folks are in there. I can kind of show you the multiplayer. So you can see now there's 3 people moving around in here and kind of going through the document. So you can see how there's multiple folks that are in there right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and this use case that we created, I mean, you could create your own use case for whatever process that you may follow that may be unique, et cetera. But I was going to say that I want to thank you, Stan, again for the opportunity to present and to use this format of live Zoom. And Arielle, you did a fantastic job. Thank you for making us all look good.
It's an esteemed audience. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Mhm.
Well, thanks to both of you, Dan and Arielle, for your presentation today. Thanks to everybody who participated. And we will have the recording posted later and the chat transcript. We got the link there that Arielle provided. So hopefully people will take advantage of that. I see a lot of positive feedback in the comments. So that's good to see. We'll see everybody again in a month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.